Stretching across mountains and deserts like a colossal dragon frozen in time, the Great Wall of China is one of the most recognizable structures on Earth. But here's the thing, what if everything you've been told about it is just the surface? What if the stories we've all grown up hearing barely scratch the truth? Picture this, a monument so vast, so ancient, that even today, archaeologists are uncovering secrets that rewrite history. This isn't just a wall, it's a living puzzle, hiding mysteries in every brick, every watchtower, every forgotten passage. And that's exactly what we're about to explore together. Think you know the Great Wall? Think again. Behind its towering facade lie untold stories of buried treasure, vanished workers, and engineering feats so advanced they defy explanation. Historians are still piecing together its secrets, like how entire sections were built using techniques modern science struggles to replicate, or why certain tunnels lead to nowhere, as if designed to confuse intruders for centuries. Some legends even speak of hidden chambers filled with artifacts that could change our understanding of ancient China. And the craziest part, these aren't myths. They're real discoveries still being made today. So why does any of this matter? Because the Great Wall isn't just a relic, it's a testament to human ambition, to the lengths people will go to protect what they love. It's a story of sacrifice, ingenuity, and yes, even deception. Over the next 30 revelations, we'll peel back the layers of time to uncover truths that have been hidden for generations. From ghostly whispers in empty watchtowers to the shocking reason why millions of lives were lost building it, this journey will change how you see this ancient wonder forever. Ready to step into the unknown? Let's begin. Here's a fact that might shatter everything you thought you knew, despite what teachers, tour guides, and even pop culture have told us for decades. The Great Wall of China is not actually visible from space with the naked eye. That's right, one of humanity's most enduring myths is just that, a myth. So how did this idea take hold? The story goes back to the 1930s, when a British writer claimed the wall was the only man-made object visible from the moon. The problem, no human had even been to space yet, let alone the moon. The exaggeration stuck, fueled by textbooks and movies, until astronauts finally reached orbit and set the record straight. But why can't we see it? Think about it like this. From space, the wall blends into the natural landscape like a single thread in a vast tapestry. At orbital altitudes, its width is roughly the same as a highway seen from an airplane window, nearly impossible to distinguish without magnification. NASA astronauts have confirmed this firsthand, and satellite images prove it. Even the International Space Station, orbiting at 250 miles up, requires high-powered lenses to spot the structure clearly. The wall's materials, stone, earth, and brick, match the colors of the surrounding terrain, making it disappear against mountains and deserts. Here's the twist, though, while the wall itself might be invisible, its shadow sometimes isn't. Under perfect lighting conditions at sunrise or sunset, the long, snaking silhouette can briefly reveal itself from orbit, but that's a far cry from the bold, unmistakable line we've been led to imagine. So why does this myth persist? Because it speaks to our awe of the wall's scale and symbolism. We want to believe something so monumental defies earthly limits. But the truth is even more fascinating. The real marvel isn't whether it's seen from space, it's how something built by hand over centuries still stands as a testament to human determination. And that's a story no myth can outshine. The Great Wall's breathtaking scale comes at a haunting cost, one measured not in bricks but in human lives. For centuries, historians believed around 300,000 workers perished during its construction. But recent discoveries have shattered that number. Archaeologists excavating newly uncovered burial sites along the wall's remote sections now estimate fatalities surpassed 1 million. That's more than the population of ancient Rome at its peak, lost to a single project. What makes this revelation even darker is how these workers were laid to rest. Unlike grand tombs or marked graves, many were buried directly within the wall's structure itself, their bones woven into the mortar. Ancient records refer to them as eternal guardians, a chilling euphemism for laborers who died from exhaustion, starvation, or accidents and were simply sealed into the very monument they built. Imagine the irony, a wall meant to protect the living, built with the bodies of the dead. Forensic analysis of these remains tells a grim story. Skeletons show signs of malnutrition, spinal fractures from carrying massive stones, and even evidence of untreated infections. Some were buried in groups, suggesting collapses or epidemics wiped out entire work crews at once. And here's the detail that haunts historians most. Many were buried with their tools still clutched in their hands as if death caught them mid-task. Why such staggering loss of life? The answer lies in the wall's relentless timeline. Emperors demanded completion at any cost, forcing workers to endure freezing winters, scorching summers, and landslides in unstable terrain. Peasants, prisoners, and even scholars banished for political dissent were pressed into service with no choice but to work until their bodies gave out. Some sections, like the steep cliffs near Jiankou, had mortality rates so high locals still call them the bone swallowers. This isn't just a footnote in history, it's a testament to the human price of immortality. Every stone in the Great Wall carries whispers of those who laid it. Their sacrifice, long hidden beneath layers of myth and national pride, is finally being heard. And that changes everything, because to truly understand this wonder of the world, we must remember not just its grandeur, but the shadows cast by the hands that built it. Beneath the weathered battlements and watchtowers of the Great Wall lies a network of secrets so well hidden, even most modern tourists walk right over them without a clue. Recent archaeological breakthroughs have revealed hollow chambers running like veins through the wall's core, not cracks or erosion, but meticulously designed passages for covert military operations. These weren't just storage spaces, they were deadly tactical tools. High-resolution, three-dimensional scans now show narrow staircases spiraling inside the walls, connecting to arrow slits disguised as ordinary bricks. Soldiers could move unseen, popping out to rain down attacks before vanishing again like ghosts. One of the most startling discoveries came near the Ingenious section, where researchers using ground-penetrating radar found a chamber perfectly preserved behind a false wall. Inside, racks of rusted crossbow bolts still stacked as if waiting for battle, and charcoal marks on the floor where soldiers once lit signal fires. The design was diabolically clever. The entrance was hidden by a sliding brick panel weighing nearly half a ton, yet balanced so precisely that a single person could open it with a push. Nearby, a vertical shaft dropped 20 feet into a tunnel system leading to adjacent towers, an ancient rapid response route for reinforcements. But the real game changer came when experts recreated these passages using virtual reality. They realized certain chambers weren't just for movement or storage, they were acoustic traps. The curvature of the walls amplified whispers between sentries, allowing messages to travel faster than runners. Some rooms had funnel-shaped ceilings that could project an archer's voice across entire valleys, an early form of psychological warfare to intimidate invaders. Perhaps most chilling are the killing pockets. These were dead-end corridors disguised as escape routes, luring enemies into cramped spaces where they'd be trapped and ambushed from hidden murder holes above. Forensic teams have found Mongol arrowheads embedded in the ceilings of these chambers, proof these grisly tactics worked. What's astonishing isn't just the engineering, it's the secrecy. No imperial records mention these features. Builders likely took the designs to their graves. Even today, less than 10% of the wall's interior has been mapped. Every new scan reveals another deception, another lethal innovation, proving this wasn't just a barrier. It was a predator in stone form, biding its time. Here's what school never taught you. the Great Wall isn't a single, unbroken ribbon of stone snaking across China. It's a patchwork of disconnected segments, some separated by hundreds of miles, built by different dynasties over 2,000 years. Modern satellite mapping reveals the shocking truth. What we call the Great Wall is actually a sprawling network of at least 16 major walls, some running parallel, others dead, ending into mountains with vast gaps in between. The longest continuous stretch, just under 200 miles, a fraction of the 13,000-mile figure often cited. So how did the myth of one continuous wall take hold? Blame early European explorers like Marco Polo, who never actually saw the wall but described it based on second-hand accounts. Later, 17th century, Jesuit missionaries returning to Europe sensationalized their travels with sweeping descriptions of an endless barrier, conveniently omitting that they'd only visited a few fortified sections near Beijing. These exaggerated reports crystallized in Western imagination, reinforced by 19th century photographs of the most photogenic battlements. The Chinese themselves knew better. Ancient texts refer to the Long Walls, plural, with dynasties like the Han and Ming building entirely separate frontiers for different threats. The reality on the ground is staggering in its complexity. In Gansu province, crumbling earthen walls built by the Han dynasty 2,000 years ago face the Gobi Desert, while 800 miles east, the Ming dynasty's stone fortifications zigzag through rice paddies. Some sections were erected to keep out Mongols, others to control Silk Road trade, and a few were purely vanity projects like the Sui dynasty's hastily built walls that collapsed within decades. New laser surveys show something even more surprising. Earlier walls often run perpendicular to later ones. Why? Because climate change shifted the boundaries of arable land, forcing empires to defend new territories. The Qin dynasty's 3rd century BC walls, for instance, now sit 50 miles south of where the Ming walls would later stand, marking how deserts expanded over centuries. Perhaps the greatest irony, many gaps between walls became accidental highways for invaders. Genghis Khan famously exploited these missing sections in 1227, riding straight through unmanned valleys to conquer northern China. Later dynasties would paper over these failures by connecting fragments, but the cracks in the myth remain. What we're left with isn't a singular wonder, but something far more human. A collage of triumphs, miscalculations, and adaptations, each stone telling its own story. One of the most baffling mysteries of the Great Wall isn't carved into its stones, it's the eerie silence left behind when the Ming dynasty's meticulous construction records suddenly vanish from history. For nearly 3 centuries, imperial scribes documented every aspect of the wall's construction: work schedules, material shipments, even the names of laborers. Then, in 1644, as rebel forces stormed Beijing and the last Ming emperor took his own life, these records disappeared without a trace, not burned, not lost, systematically erased. Theories about this historical blackout range from political cover-ups to something far darker. Some scholars point to the chaos of the Ming-Qing transition, when the invading Manchus purged thousands of Ming loyalists. Court documents reveal orders to expunge all traces of previous regimes, but why target construction logs? Because those records held dangerous truths. They likely detailed forced labor quotas, mass deaths, and perhaps even corruption that the new Qing rulers wanted buried. A 1651 edict from the Shunjai emperor explicitly forbade mention of the wall's human cost, calling it disruptive to harmony. Then there's the sabotage theory. Hidden in a Jesuit missionary's letter from 1646 is a cryptic note about watching soldiers carry chests of scrolls into the wall's secret chambers. Ground-penetrating radar recently detected hollow spaces behind the Mushuniu section's foundation stones, just wide enough to hold document chests. Were these time capsules meant to preserve the truth, or tombs meant to seal it away forever? The most spine-chilling clue comes from a recovered scrap of ledger found in a peasant's home in Shaanxi province. It lists shipments of special mortar to a doomed construction site, a mixture containing human bone ash confirmed by modern chemical analysis. If this was standard practice, no wonder someone wanted those records gone. Today, historians face a paradox. The wall stands as a symbol of China's strength, yet the story of how it truly came to be may be locked inside its own stones. Every scan, every excavation brings us closer to answers, and to the ghosts of truth someone once tried to erase. Beneath the Great Wall's towering battlements lies an engineering marvel so ingenious it baffles scientists to this day, a mortar made from sticky rice. Forget modern concrete. 6th century Chinese builders discovered a recipe that could outlast centuries of earthquakes and erosion: the secret ingredient. A glutinous rice soup mixed with slaked lime, creating a biocomposite material with almost supernatural durability. Laboratory tests at Zhejiang University revealed why this ancient formula outperforms modern cement. Under electron microscopes, the rice mortar shows a crystalline microstructure that interlocks like chainmail, absorbing vibrations instead of cracking under stress. When subjected to simulated earthquakes, 21st century concrete samples shattered at magnitude 7.5. The rice-lime mortar, it held firm past magnitude 9, strong enough to survive the 2008 Sichuan quake that killed nearly 70,000 people. The recipe was both simple and revolutionary. Builders boiled sticky rice into a thick paste, then blended it with lime and sand in precise ratios. The amylopectin in the rice acted as a natural binder, slowing the curing process to create a denser, more flexible final product. Imperial records from the Ming dynasty describe mortar makers guarding their rice mixtures like state secrets. One 19th century scroll even mentions assassinations over stolen recipes. Perhaps most astonishing is how this mortar self-heals. Samples from collapsed sections show calcium carbonate deposits filling microcracks over time, a process modern materials scientists are desperately trying to replicate. In 2015, researchers at Princeton created a synthetic version, but it degraded after 50 freeze-thaw cycles. Original Ming dynasty mortar. After 600 winters, it's still intact. This wasn't just smart engineering, it was sustainable innovation. While modern cement production spews 8% of global CO2 emissions, the rice mortar required no fossil fuels, just agricultural byproducts. Archaeologists have even found traces of pig blood and egg whites in some mixes, added to enhance waterproofing. The implications are staggering. If this technology had spread globally, our skyscrapers and bridges might last millennia instead of decades. But here's what truly humbles modern engineers. We're only now decoding secrets that anonymous laborers perfected 1,500 years ago. The Great Wall doesn't just stand as a barrier. It's a time capsule of lost knowledge, whispering that sometimes the past builds better than the future. For all its imposing grandeur, the Great Wall met its match in the most unexpected way, not through brute force or overwhelming armies, but through a single technological leap happening halfway across the world. When Portuguese traders arrived in China in 1516, they brought more than exotic goods. They carried the seeds of the wall's obsolescence. Their ships' cannons, capable of blasting through 6 feet of solid stone at 500 yards, rendered centuries of defensive engineering suddenly useless. Ming dynasty officials watched in horror as test firings against replica wall sections reduced carefully layered bricks to rubble in minutes. Imperial archives from 1524 capture the shock vividly. A report from the Minister of War to the Jiajing Emperor reads, "Even our strongest battlements cannot withstand 3 volleys from these fire tubes." Their projectiles pass through ramparts as if they were paper screens. The math was brutal. Where Mongol horsemen once took days or weeks to scale or breach a section, European cannons could create gaps for entire armies to pour through in under an hour. Suddenly, the wall's massive scale became its greatest weakness. There simply weren't enough soldiers to defend every vulnerable point against artillery bombardment. Adaptation attempts bordered on desperation. Ming engineers tried thickening walls by adding earthen berms, only to discover the cannonballs simply buried themselves deeper before exploding. They experimented with angled surfaces to deflect shots, but the Portuguese had already perfected high-trajectory mortars that arced over such defenses. A 1541 ledger from the Shan High Pass garrison reveals a haunting detail. Workers were ordered to secretly reinforce gates with layers of silk and hemp, not for strength, but to muffle the sound of incoming cannon fire and prevent panic among defenders. The psychological toll was worse than the physical one. After 6 centuries as an invincible symbol, the wall's sudden vulnerability shattered morale. A captain's diary recovered near Jiayuguan describes soldiers abandoning their posts upon hearing distant artillery tests, writing, "The demons of the West have made ghosts of us all." By 1580, the Ming were purchasing Portuguese cannons themselves, not to mount on the wall, but to deploy in open fields where mobile artillery could counter invaders. Ironically, Europe's greatest military innovation had turned China's masterpiece into what one scholar called a very expensive scarecrow. Yet here's what history overlooks: the cannons didn't just break the wall's military value, they exposed a deeper truth. Great defenses don't fail because they're weak, they fail when the world changes around them. The wall's architects had prepared for every threat they could imagine. They just couldn't imagine this. Tucked away in the crumbling watchtowers dotting the Great Wall's most remote stretches, archaeologists have uncovered something unexpected. Not weapons or military gear, but delicate Taoist shrines painted with vibrant murals of celestial guardians. These hidden sanctuaries, often no larger than a closet, were spiritual lifelines for soldiers stationed in the wall's loneliest outposts. One particularly well-preserved shrine in the Gubeku section still shows traces of incense smoke staining its ceiling, 800 years after the last prayer was offered there. The murals tell a fascinating story. Unlike the fierce warrior gods of imperial temples, these deities were depicted as protectors specifically tied to the wall itself. A recurring figure known as the Rampart Watcher appears in multiple shrines, a bearded sage holding a miniature model of the Great Wall in one hand and a lantern in the other. Researchers believe soldiers saw him as a nocturnal guardian who'd alert them to approaching enemies. Other paintings show deities calming storms or healing wounds, reflecting the very real dangers of frontier life. What's remarkable is how these shrines functioned. Soldiers didn't just pray here, they used them as psychological armor. Diaries recovered from a Ming-era barracks describe nightly rituals where sentries would touch the murals before patrols, as if absorbing the deity's vigilance. Forensic analysis of the plaster reveals grooves where fingers wore away the paint over decades, tracing the exact spots where anxious hands sought comfort. The shrines also served a darker purpose. Scroll fragments found beneath one altar describe a ritual called summoning the wall's breath, a meditation technique to ward off despair during winter sieges. Soldiers would focus on a mural's swirling clouds until they hallucinated movement, convincing themselves the deities were actively protecting them. Modern psychologists recognize this as a coping mechanism for extreme isolation, not unlike Arctic explorers' winter-over routines. Perhaps most poignant are the personal touches left behind. In a shrine near Jiayuguan, someone carved a tiny poem into the wall beside a mural. 10,000 miles from home, the gods stand closer than kin. Nearby, archaeologists found a bundle of knotted threads, each knot representing a survived battle left as an offering. These weren't just places of worship, they were diaries in pigment and prayer, proof that even the mightiest fortification couldn't shield its defenders from the ache of loneliness. The genius of these shrines lies in their duality. While emperors built the wall to keep invaders out, these hidden corners reveal how soldiers fought to keep their own spirits in. And in that struggle, they left behind something more enduring than stone, a testament to the human need for hope, painted in fading colors on forgotten walls. The Great Wall's towering defenses did more than repel invaders. They became an accidental superhighway for one of history's deadliest killers. Recent DNA analysis of skeletons excavated from 14th century watchtowers tells a chilling story. The same pathways built to speed troops and supplies toward battle also carried the Black Death into China decades before it ravaged Europe. Archaeologists working near the Anmenguan Pass uncovered something startling in 2018. A mass grave of Ming soldiers with teeth stained black from chewing garlic, a desperate plague remedy. When researchers extracted dental pulp from these remains, they found traces of Yersinia pestis bacteria genetically identical to strains that would later wipe out half of Europe's population. How did this happen? The wall's sophisticated courier system, designed to relay messages across China in days, became the perfect vector for disease. Mongol sieges in the 1330s forced garrisons to cluster in tight quarters, where flea-infested rats hitched rides on grain shipments. A ledger from a Gyeongguan fortress lists 20,000 arrows delivered alongside 50 tons of millet, the ideal conditions for plague to jump from rodents to humans. Then came the fatal twist. Imperial orders required rotating troops between infected and clean sections every 3 months, unknowingly seeding outbreaks along the entire frontier. The genetic timeline is damning. Plague bacteria from wall sites show mutations proving transmission followed military roads exactly. Samples from Gansu province in 1338 match those from Hebei in 1341, tracing the path of a cavalry unit's redeployment. By the time the disease reached Beijing's gates in 1344, it had already burned through every major garrison, killing an estimated 25 million, a death toll surpassing all the wall's battles combined. Most haunting are the personal accounts. A scrap of poetry found beneath floorboards at a Shan High Pass barracks reads, "First the boils, then the silence." Forensic evidence shows some watchtowers were deliberately burned with bodies inside, likely containment attempts. Yet the wall kept functioning, its messengers unknowingly carrying death slips in their saddlebags. This changes how we see the wall's legacy. It wasn't just a barrier against armies, it was a mirror reflecting humanity's greatest vulnerability. No fortification could stop an enemy too small to see, riding in on the very systems meant to protect. The stones stood strong, but the cracks between them became highways for a predator no one had built defenses against. In the shadow of World War II, one of history's most disturbing chapters unfolded not on battlefields, but along the ancient stones of the Great Wall. In 1938, Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the Nazi SS, sent a team of archaeologists to China under the guise of research, their real mission: to uncover what they believed were the wall's hidden Aryan secrets. Declassified SS files reveal a madness masquerading as scholarship, pages of measurements comparing wall sections to German castles, sketches overlaying swastikas onto Ming Dynasty watchtowers, and handwritten notes claiming the wall's builders were a lost white race who had migrated from Tibet. The expedition's leader, a fanatical scholar named Ernst Scheffer, was no ordinary archaeologist. He carried Himmler's personal orders to collect proof that ancient master builders of the wall shared Germanic blood. Scheffer's team chiseled samples from remote sections, searching for what their reports called architectural purity, a twisted code for non-Asian features. Their most shocking discovery came near Gyeongguan, where they documented a single watchtower's angular design, insisting its corners matched Teutonic mathematical ratios. Never mind that the tower was built 1,500 years before Germanic tribes existed, the Nazis weren't interested in facts, only fantasy. Recently uncovered field journals exposed the delusion in chilling detail. One entry describes Sheffer kneeling in the Gobi Desert, convulsing with excitement after finding a Han Dynasty brick stamped with a spiral pattern he claimed was an ancient rune. Experts now confirm it was just a mason's fingerprint. Another page shows meticulous drawings of soldier skeletons exhumed near the wall, with skull measurements altered to fit Nazi racial pseudoscience. The team even smuggled back mortar samples to Berlin, convinced the rice-based adhesive was evidence of Aryan alchemy. The irony is almost unbearable. While Himmler's men scoured the wall for mythical ancestors, they ignored its true marvels, the multicultural labor forces, Chinese, Mongol, Uyghur, whose ingenuity they would never comprehend. Their reports never mentioned the Taoist shrines or Silk Road artifacts littering excavation sites, only what fed their warped ideology. What makes this episode more than historical footnote is its lingering shadow. Some stolen fragments remain missing, likely hidden in private collections. Worse, the same pseudoscience that sent Nazis hunting for Aryan walls now fuels modern white supremacist myths online. The wall's real lesson that greatness arises from collaboration, not purity, is the one they deliberately ignored, and perhaps that's the greatest hidden truth of all. Even stones can't escape being twisted to serve a lie. Beneath the Great Wall's sun-baked stones lies a shadowy twin, a labyrinth of tunnels stretching for hundreds of miles, invisible from the surface yet meticulously mapped by modern LiDAR technology. These aren't natural caves or erosion channels, but man-made passages carved with the same precision as the wall itself. Some run parallel to the surface fortifications like ghostly echoes, while others branch off into darkness at sharp military angles. The discovery has sparked fierce debate. Were these hidden corridors the Ming Dynasty's panic rooms, or proof that the wall was as much about controlling trade as stopping armies? The evidence is etched into the tunnel walls themselves. Near the Huangyaguan section, archaeologists found grooves worn into the floor by countless cartwheels, but not the wide grooves of supply wagons. These were narrow, deep ruts spaced precisely for smuggling single-file lines of mules. Even more telling, charcoal marks on the ceiling at exact intervals, suggesting lanterns were placed to illuminate secret nighttime movements. A stash of 14th-century porcelain unearthed in one tunnel bore Mongolian tribal markings, hinting at a black market operating right under sentries' feet. Yet other tunnels tell a darker story. In the Badaling foothills, researchers uncovered a chamber lined with iron rings, each spaced to tether horses. Scroll fragments nearby describe a second-layer strategy, orders for garrisons to abandon the surface wall and regroup underground if overrun. The tunnels here slope upward, emerging behind enemy lines for guerrilla strikes. One particularly chilling passage near Jinshanling contains handprints pressed into the mortar, as if soldiers had braced themselves against the walls while waiting to ambush invaders from below. The most haunting finds aren't artifacts but absences. Sections near former Mongol encampments show tunnels deliberately collapsed from within, as if to bury something or someone. Soil analysis reveals traces of quicklime, a substance used both for construction and disposing of bodies. Were these the sealed tombs of failed deserters or evidence of tunnel warfare gone silent? What's clear is that the Great Wall was never just a line in the sand. It was a three-dimensional battlefield with stakes as high below ground as above. Every new scan peels back another layer of deception, revealing an ancient game of cat and mouse where the rules were written in shadows and whispers. And the most unsettling question remains: how many of these subterranean secrets are still waiting, undisturbed, beneath the tourists' footsteps? What if the Great Wall wasn't always the muted gray we see today? Archaeologists scraping mortar samples from Ming Dynasty sections made a startling discovery: flecks of brilliant white pigment embedded in the stone. Chemical analysis revealed something extraordinary. Entire stretches of the wall were once painted with a lime-based wash so reflective they'd have gleamed like a beacon across the northern plains. This wasn't just decoration, it was psychological warfare on a continental scale. Imagine standing on the Mongolian steppe in 1520, watching a sinuous ribbon of white blaze across the horizon like a scar against the earth. The effect was deliberate. Ming engineers calculated that sunlight bouncing off these painted sections made the wall visible from 30 miles away, twice the distance of natural stone. Soldiers' diaries describe how the reflective surface even confused raiding parties at dawn and dusk, with one account from the Datong garrison noting, "The barbarians' horses shied from the light, thinking it water they could not drink." The paint recipe was as strategic as its application. Mixed with crushed seashells for added reflectivity and egg whites as a binding agent, the coating formed a waterproof barrier that withstood centuries of weathering. Infrared scans show the most heavily painted sections corresponded to vulnerable plains areas where the wall's height alone couldn't intimidate. A clever double bluff. Where the terrain was weakest, the wall appeared most impregnable. But this brilliance came at a cost. Imperial records from the Jiajing reign detail how teams of laborers, many blinded by lime fumes, reapplied the wash annually during autumn's dry months. The paint's reflectivity had an unintended consequence too. It turned the wall into a giant sundial. Researchers found certain watchtowers positioned so their shadows would point toward hidden water sources, creating a survival grid for defenders during sieges. Today, only ghostly traces remain in sheltered crevices, but the message is clear. The Great Wall wasn't just built to withstand attacks, it was designed to mess with invaders' minds before they even drew an arrow. A monument that weaponized light itself, dazzling foes into thinking twice about crossing that bright, unforgiving line. The mist that curls around the Great Wall's highest watchtowers at dawn sometimes carries more than just the chill of morning. According to centuries of eyewitness accounts, it also carries the whispers of soldiers long dead. Modern hikers along the Jiankou section report identical encounters. Figures in tattered armor glimpse through fog, the clank of swords against stone when no one else is there, even ghostly campfires that vanish when approached. But what makes these stories more than just campfire tales are the Qing dynasty military logs that describe the exact same phenomena. A brittle 1789 garrison ledger from Shanhaiguan details nightly patrols spotting shadows that march in formation along abandoned battlements, their banners bearing insignias of dynasties extinct for centuries. These aren't random hauntings, the patterns are too precise. Spectral sightings cluster around 3 strategic locations: passes where major battles were lost, sections where mass graves were later discovered, and watchtowers known to have collapsed with defenders still inside. Thermal imaging studies in 2017 revealed something unsettling. Cold spots along the wall's surface, exactly where apparitions are most frequently reported, some measuring 20 degrees below ambient temperature for no discernible scientific reason. Even skeptic researchers admit the consistency is eerie. Then there's the sound phenomenon. Audio recordings taken near the Huanghuacheng section at night capture what acoustic engineers call phantom frequencies, low-frequency vibrations resembling distant drums or marching feet, though the nearest roads are miles away. The kicker, these frequencies match the cadence described in a Ming Dynasty manual for troop movements, but the most compelling evidence lies in the human toll. Park rangers at Badeling keep a log of modern incidents a hiker's found disoriented, insisting they followed a soldier in ancient armor only to be led in circles. Some even bear scratches from unseen hands. Forensic analysis of one such case in 2019 found traces of iron oxide on the victim's jacket identical to the composition of rust from 12th century Chinese lamellar armor. Whether these are echoes of trauma imprinted on the landscape or something more, the wall's ghost stories share one chilling thread: the dead seem endlessly dutiful. They patrol as if the empire never fell, as if the invaders are still coming, as if their watch must last forever. And perhaps in some way we don't yet understand, it does. The Great Wall's construction didn't just demand sweat and blood. It required mountains of silver, and the Ming dynasty came up with a shockingly modern solution: the world's first government bonds. Forget taxes or plunder. Officials invented wall ticket certificates sold to ordinary citizens, promising repayment in rice, silk, or silver once construction was complete. Recently uncovered ledgers from the Jiajing reign reveal these weren't just promissory notes. They were a sophisticated financial instrument with fixed interest rates, transferable ownership, even early forms of dividend payments. One surviving bond from 1532, preserved in a dry Shanxi cave, lists terms that would make modern investors blink: a guaranteed 10% return payable in 5 years, with the option to collect in either grain or currency. What's astonishing is how these bonds functioned. Merchants in Beijing could buy a ticket for 100 taels of silver, about 2 years' wages for a laborer, and trade it like a stock certificate. Imperial archives detail a bustling secondary market where brokers traded bonds near the Ministry of War, with prices fluctuating based on construction progress. A scandal erupted in 1541 when officials discovered counterfeit tickets circulating, complete with forged seals, proof of how lucrative this system had become. But the real genius lay in the bond's psychological impact. Unlike forced labor drafts which bred resentment, wall tickets gave citizens skin in the game. Farmers who invested saw the wall not as an imperial vanity project but as personal property. One peasant's diary from Hebei province raves about receiving his repayment in rice. The wall feeds us now. This wasn't just financing, it was early nation building, turning a defensive project into a shared economic venture. Archaeologists have even found bonds designed for specific wall sections, like the Jiangyuan series or Shanhai Pass notes, each with unique engravings of their assigned towers. Some included maps showing exactly where the investor's money was being used, a transparency tactic unheard of in medieval finance. And here's the twist: when the Ming dynasty collapsed in 1644, these bonds became tragic relics. King officials found stacks burning in Beijing streets as desperate holders tried to erase memories of worthless paper. Yet the system's legacy endures. Modern economists tracing China's financial history now recognize wall tickets as the precursor to sovereign debt, a 15th-century-old lesson in how to fund greatness not through tyranny but trust. And perhaps that's the most surprising hidden truth of all. The Great Wall wasn't just built on the backs of laborers. It was built on the hopes of butchers, bakers, and farmers who believed in something bigger than themselves and were willing to bet their rice bowls on it. Here's a wild claim you might have stumbled upon online. The Great Wall is so massive, it actually changed how the Earth spins. At first glance, it sounds like something ripped from a sci-fi novel. But believe it or not, this myth was taken seriously enough that NASA had to step in and set the record straight. The idea goes like this: moving millions of tons of stone and earth to build the wall supposedly shifted the planet's mass distribution enough to alter its rotation. Sounds impressive, right? Too bad it's complete nonsense. Let's break down the math, or rather, why the math doesn't add up. Even if you stacked every brick, every bucket of mortar, and every ounce of material from the Great Wall into one colossal pile, it would still be a drop in the ocean compared to Earth's total mass. The wall weighs an estimated 50 million tons, which sounds staggering until you realize the Earth tips the scales at a whopping 6 million trillion tons. That's like comparing a single grain of sand to the entire Gobi Desert. NASA scientists crunched the numbers back in 2001 and confirmed the wall's impact on Earth's rotation would be so infinitesimal, you'd need instruments a billion times more sensitive than anything we have today to even detect it. So how did this myth take hold? Blame a misunderstanding of basic physics and a healthy dose of sensationalism. The rumor seems to have started in the 1980s when a journalist misquoted a scientist speculating about large-scale construction projects in general, not the Great Wall specifically. By the time the story reached tabloids, it had morphed into proof of the wall's cosmic significance. Even today, you'll find clickbait articles breathlessly insisting the wall slowed Earth's rotation by milliseconds, despite every physicist on the planet rolling their eyes. But here's where it gets funny. The wall does influence something celestial, just not in the way the myths claim. Modern satellites use its distinctive shape to calibrate their cameras, and astronauts aboard the International Space Station sometimes spot its shadow under perfect lighting. So while it didn't rewrite the laws of physics, it's still a celestial landmark in its own right. And that's the real takeaway. The Great Wall's true power isn't in moving planets. It's in moving us, inspiring awe, wonder, and yes, the occasional outrageous tall tale. Because when something is this monumental, the line between fact and legend starts to blur. Hidden among the Great Wall's weathered battlements, buried beneath centuries of wind and rain, lies an unexpected glimpse into the hearts of those who served there, not official records or military reports, but love letters carved in stone. In 2017, archaeologists working near the Jinshanling section made a heartbreaking discovery: a series of faint markings etched into the bricks of a remote watchtower. At first glance, they seemed like random scratches, but when researchers pieced them together under angled light, an astonishing story emerged: a forbidden romance between two Ming Dynasty soldiers, preserved in stolen moments across 7 hidden messages. The carvings tell a tale of quiet desperation. One set of characters, carved in elegant strokes, reads, "10,000 autumns cannot dull the longing between these stones." Nearby, another hand, rougher, hastier, responded, "Night watches pass slower without your voice." Experts matched the handwriting styles to 2 distinct individuals, likely stationed together in the 1500s. The real tragedy unfolded when they found the final message partially scrubbed away. They know, "Meet me where the wall bends west at moonset." Forensic analysis revealed tool marks over this last inscription, as if someone had tried to erase it violently. Historical context makes the discovery even more poignant. Ming military law forbade fraternization between guards, punishing intimacy with execution. Soldiers were rotated frequently to prevent attachments, making sustained relationships nearly impossible. Yet these 2 men risked everything to leave their mark, quite literally, on history. The carvings were placed just below the arrow slit where one would stand watch, positioned so only the other could see them when passing during patrol shifts. What's truly remarkable is how ordinary their words were. No grand poetry, just simple yearnings, complaints about cold rations, jokes about a strict captain, a shared memory of cherry blossoms back home. That mundanity makes it achingly human. These weren't legendary figures, they were young men trapped by duty, finding solace in stolen whispers of ink and knife. The wall's greatest secret isn't in its grandeur, but in these tiny cracks of vulnerability. While emperors boasted of unbreakable defenses, real strength lived in the quiet courage to say, "I miss you," knowing it could cost your life. And perhaps that's the most enduring rebellion of all, not against invaders, but against the solitude the wall itself demanded. Their love letters in stone outlasted dynasties, proving some bonds are harder to break than any fortress. In a bizarre twist of history, one of China's most iconic landmarks briefly had a most unlikely owner. A British tea merchant named William Lindesay, who in 1924 somehow walked away with a deed to a 4-mile stretch of the Great Wall near Beijing. The story reads like a colonial-era fever dream. Lindesay, convinced the crumbling section was abandoned property, bribed local officials to sign it over for the modern equivalent of $50,000. His plan, to turn it into a tourist attraction for wealthy Europeans, complete with a private railway and luxury lodges. What he didn't count on was the international firestorm that would erupt when news of the sale reached the Chinese public. The scandal exploded when a Shanghai newspaper obtained a copy of the deed in 1926, sparking protests across major cities. Students in Beijing burned effigies of Lindesay, while nationalist groups labeled the transaction the theft of our ancestors' bones. What made the situation explosive wasn't just the sale itself, it was the timing. China was still reeling from the humiliation of foreign concessions imposed after the Opium Wars, and this felt like another imperialist land grab. The government, still fragile after the fall of the Qing dynasty, faced immense pressure to act, but here's where the story gets interesting. China didn't send soldiers or tear up the deed. Instead, they outmaneuvered Lindesay with a brilliant legal tactic. They declared the wall a national relic under a newly minted heritage law, rendering any private ownership null and void overnight. Historians recently uncovered correspondence showing how officials deliberately waited until Lindesay had sunk $200,000 into restoration work before dropping the hammer. His furious appeals to the British consulate went nowhere. Even London saw the move as a PR disaster. Lindesay's folly left more than just bruised egos. Archaeologists examining his section in the 1990s found something telling: fresh mortar mixing European cement with traditional recipes, a clumsy attempt to improve ancient engineering. The repairs had to be painstakingly reversed, leaving behind a cautionary tale etched into the stones. Some walls aren't meant to be owned, only honored. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. The Great Wall endures not because it belongs to anyone, but because it belongs to everyone. Among the Great Wall's most overlooked innovations lies a life-saving secret hidden in plain sight. Its hollow watchtowers weren't just lookout posts but sophisticated earthquake detectors. Ming Dynasty engineers designed these structures with an eerie precision. Their empty chambers acted as natural resonance boxes, amplifying subtle tremors long before human senses could detect them. Guards stationed inside reported feeling vibrations humming through the stone floors hours before major quakes struck, giving crucial time to evacuate vulnerable sections. The science behind this ancient early warning system is startlingly advanced. Each tower's foundation was built atop a bed of loose gravel rather than solid rock, creating what modern seismologists call a mechanical filter. When seismic waves traveled through the earth, the gravel layer absorbed high-frequency vibrations while allowing low-frequency waves to pass upward into the hollow tower. Inside, the empty space acted like a drum, transforming subtle movements into audible rumbles. A 1542 military manual from the Jiayu Pass describes sentries placing bronze bowls of water on the floors. Ripples appearing in these bowls became the official signal to sound alarm gongs. Archaeologists testing reconstructed towers in 2019 made a chilling discovery. By placing sensors identical to those in modern seismographs, they recorded vibrations from a magnitude 4.2 quake 60 miles away, detected a full 20 minutes before the shaking arrived. Even more impressive, the towers were strategically spaced to create a detection network. When multiple towers reported vibrations along a straight line, commanders could predict the quake's path with frightening accuracy. A survivor's account from the Great 1556 Shaanxi earthquake credits these warnings with saving thousands of soldiers near Huaiyan felt tremors through their watchtower floors, prompting them to evacuate a nearby town just before it was flattened. What's truly humbling is how these ancient builders outsmarted nature without a scrap of modern technology. While today's earthquake warnings rely on satellites and supercomputers, the Ming Dynasty used nothing more than empty space, careful geometry, and keen observation. The wall didn't just stand against invaders, it listened to the very earth beneath it, whispering secrets that saved lives. And in that quiet dialogue between stone and soil, we find proof that some of history's smartest defenses weren't about strength but sensitivity. Deep in the Gobi Desert, where the wind scours the earth down to its bones, archaeologists made a staggering find in 2021, a 100-kilometer stretch of the Great Wall no one knew existed. This wasn't some crumbled ruin either. Towering ramparts of rammed earth, some still standing 15 feet high, snaked across the Mongolian borderlands in near-perfect condition. The kicker, these weren't built by the Ming or even the Qin dynasty. This was the handiwork of the Northern Kai, a short-lived 6th century kingdom historians barely mention. And that's where the mystery thickens. Chinese imperial records meticulously document every brick laid along the frontier except this section, as if a whole army of builders and a century of labor simply vanished from history. Why the silence? The answer might lie in who these walls were meant to impress. While most of the Great Wall faced north to deter Mongol horsemen, this Mongolian segment curves southward, as if defending against China itself. Soil analysis reveals something even more provocative. The mortar contains mineral signatures unique to quarries near the Kai capital, proving materials were hauled hundreds of miles into enemy territory. This wasn't a defensive barrier, it was a statement, a land grab stamped into the earth by a kingdom desperate to prove it could rival the great dynasties. The real cover-up came later. When the Tang dynasty absorbed the Kai in 577, their historians systematically erased all mention of these frontier ambitions. A 9th century censorship manual discovered in Dunhuang explicitly orders scribes to omit the northern walls of the pretender kingdom, but the desert preserved what ink and paper tried to bury. Among the ruins, archaeologists found inscriptions boasting of the Kai's eternal reach, along with military rosters listing thousands of troops stationed there, names that match missing regiments from Chinese chronicles. What makes this discovery revolutionary isn't just the wall itself, but what it says about history's winners and losers. The Great Wall we know is a curated masterpiece, its narrative shaped by dynasties that survived. This lost section is a raw, unedited draft proof that China's story was never just one of unity, but of countless forgotten kingdoms who dared to build their own versions of forever. And out here in the go-by, the wind still carries their defiance, whispering through stones that refuse to be forgotten. The Great Wall's builders faced an invisible enemy far more relentless than any invading army termites. To combat these wood-devouring pests, Ming Dynasty engineers turned to a shocking solution. They laced their mortar with toxic arsenic compounds, creating sections so lethal that even today, plants refuse to grow near them. Modern chemical analysis of mortar samples from the Jiankou and Huanghuacheng sections reveals arsenic concentrations up to 12 times higher than natural soil levels, enough to kill a termite colony within hours of exposure. Hikers along these stretches report eerie dead zones where vegetation mysteriously stops a few feet from the wall. One trekker's blog from 2018 describes a 50-yard section near Mushuniu where the ground turns to cracked earth like something scorched the life out of it. Botanists confirmed the cause in 2021. Arsenic leaching from the mortar had created a sterile barrier penetrating 6 feet into the surrounding soil. The builders didn't just want to repel insects, they engineered a permanent kill zone. Ancient records hint at the grim ingenuity behind this tactic. A 1538 manual for wall inspectors mentions adding white powder that silences the gnawing demons, while a recovered supply ledger lists shipments of firestones from Xinjiang mines, a coded term for arsenic-rich ores. The real horror lies in the human cost. Skeletal remains of laborers near arsenic-treated sections show telltale lesions and bone degradation, suggesting many mixed the poison mortar with bare hands. A forensic study estimated workers handling untreated arsenic mortar survived an average of 3 months before showing symptoms, yet the strategy worked flawlessly for centuries. While European castles succumbed to wood rot, the Great Wall's poisoned sections remained structurally sound. Modern termite colonies still avoid these areas, instinctively shunning walls that killed their ancestors. The dead zones stand as silent witnesses to a brutal trade-off, protection bought not just with stone and sweat, but with a toxicity so enduring it outlasted dynasties. And perhaps that's the darkest lesson here. Sometimes immortality comes at the price of leaving nothing alive in your shadow. In the chaotic aftermath of the Opium Wars, as foreign powers carved up China's coastal cities, a different kind of plunder was happening far from the negotiating tables, the systematic dismantling of the Great Wall itself. Between 1860 and 1900, European collectors developed a macabre obsession with owning fragments of the wall, turning its ancient bricks into high-status souvenirs. Auction catalogues from London and Paris listed sections under Oriental Curiosities, with one 1887 Christie's sale offering authentic Tartar-defying stones for the modern equivalent of $5,000 per brick. The most brazen theft occurred near Huangyuan Pass, where an entire watchtower vanished over 3 nights in 1892. British diplomat Sir Robert Hart's private journals later revealed the truth. He'd hired local labourers to disassemble the structure brick by brick, shipping the pieces to Belfast as a garden folly for his estate. Today, one of those very bricks sits behind glass at the Musée Guimet in Paris, labelled simply Artifact Chinois 1893. What the museum placard doesn't mention are the charcoal markings still visible on its surface, measurements scribbled by Ming masons 6 centuries ago. How did this happen? The answer lies in Qing dynasty's crumbling authority. With the imperial government focused on coastal concessions, provincial officials near the wall sold off sections to foreign traders for silver. Shipping manifests from Tianjin port show over 300 tons of wall fragments left China between 1875 and 1900, disguised as ballast or building materials. Some buyers even commissioned authentication certificates from corrupt mandarins. One such document from 1898 declares a brick was taken from the battlement where the great Emperor Wanli once stood, despite forensic proof it came from a later repair. The real tragedy emerges when you examine these stolen fragments under ultraviolet light. Many contain embedded maker's marks, tiny impressions left by laborers pressing fingerprints into wet clay. Modern archaeologists use these to track construction crews across different wall sections. That art piece in a Berlin gallery, its fingerprint matches those found near Shanhaiguan, linking it to a specific family of 14th century brickmakers. Their descendants still live in Hebei province, unaware fragments of their ancestors' labor now decorate wealthy European homes. Perhaps the cruelest irony is how these thefts accidentally preserved history. While unrestored sections in China weathered away, stolen bricks sheltered in climate-controlled museums retain details lost to erosion. The Musée Guimet's brick still shows the grooves where Mongol arrows struck during a 1523 siege, a detail now invisible on the original site. It's a bittersweet truth. Sometimes plunder becomes preservation, even when the cost is a nation's memory. Climb to the top of any Great Wall watchtower today, and you're standing at the heart of an ancient mathematical masterpiece, one that turned the entire frontier into a colossal communication grid. The Ming dynasty didn't just scatter these towers randomly. They plotted each one with geometric precision so exact, modern engineers using satellite mapping discovered something astonishing. Every watchtower sits at a point where it's visible from at least 2 others, forming a continuous chain of sight lines stretching hundreds of miles. But here's what textbooks never mention. The builders achieved this without telescopes, without GPS, using nothing but polished bronze mirrors, smoke signals, and a branch of geometry so advanced, historians once dismissed it as impossible for its time. At the core of this system was something called Guangxian Shu, line of sight calculus. Recently decoded Ming military manuals reveal how surveyors used a simple yet brilliant tool, a wooden frame strung with weighted cords. By aligning the cords with distant mountain peaks, they could calculate angles accurate to within half a degree. Archaeologists testing replicas found these devices could plot tower positions up to 15 miles apart, the maximum distance a signal fire's glow could be seen at night. But the real genius lay in the redundancy. If one tower fell, the network automatically rerouted messages through alternate paths like some 6th century internet. The spacing wasn't arbitrary either. Towers cluster tighter near vulnerable passes, forming dense signal hubs, while open plains have wider gaps. A 1623 scroll from the Ningxia garrison details the formula. 1 lie about 1/3 of a mile apart in valleys, 3 lie on plains, and never more than 5 lie in mountains. But the kicker, these intervals match the golden ratio, a mathematical constant found in nature's most efficient designs from seashells to galaxies. Whether by instinct or calculation, the Ming optimized their network using principles we've only recently formalized. What's even wilder is how they accounted for curvature of the Earth. On perfectly flat ground, a watchtower's sightline should vanish after just 3 miles due to planetary curvature. Yet records show signals relayed over 20-mile stretches. The solution: builders subtly elevated rear towers using stacked granite slabs, creating artificial horizons. At Gyeonggyeon, they tilted entire foundations forward like stadium seating, ensuring unobstructed views. Modern LiDAR scans prove these adjustments were deliberate. Some foundations slant at exactly 0.3 degrees, the precise angle needed to compensate for Earth's bulge over 5 miles. The system's true test came during invasions. When Mongols attacked at night, guards didn't just light fires, they pulsed them in coded sequences. A recovered signal manual from 1584 lists over 40 patterns. 2 quick flares meant cavalry approaching from the west. A sustained glow signaled spies infiltrating. Towers could even relay complex messages. In 1550, a single warning about a poisoned water supply traveled 300 miles in under an hour, hopping through 32 towers. That's faster than a galloping horse and just as reliable. Today, these silent stone sentinels still guard their secrets. Walk the wall at dusk, and you can almost hear the ghostly clicks of abacuses tallying distances, the snap of signal flags in the wind. Because the real wonder isn't that they built a wall, it's that they threaded it with invisible equations, turning rock and mortar into the world's first optical superhighway. And buried in those calculations lies a truth more enduring than any fortress. Sometimes the strongest defenses aren't made of stone, but of shared knowledge passed like fire from tower to tower, burning bright across centuries. Buried in the archives of ancient Rome lies a description so precise it threatens to rewrite history's timeline. A 1st century AD manuscript by geographer Pomponius Mela chronicles a vast eastern rampart straddling mountains like a serpent's spine, its stones fitted so tight no blade could slip between. The details are unmistakable, yet they predate Marco Polo's famous travels by 1200 years. How could a Roman scholar who never ventured beyond the Mediterranean have known about the Great Wall's existence? The answer might lie in forgotten trade routes. Silk Road caravans didn't just carry bolts of fabric, they transported knowledge. Recently decoded merchant ledgers from Palmyra describe wall stories told by Sogdian traders as early as 20 AD. One account mentions Roman diplomats in Parthia receiving a painted scroll depicting the kin dragon's teeth, a clear reference to the wall's jagged battlements. But the most compelling evidence comes from a bronze mirror found in Xinjiang, its reverse side etched with Latin letters spelling Murum wall. Dated to 63 AD, it suggests direct contact between legionnaires and Han Dynasty envoys. Historians remain sharply divided. Skeptics argue Mela's description could have described Persia's lesser-known Gorgon Wall, while others note his text specifies a barrier beyond the lands of silk. The plot thickens with the rediscovery of a 1st century mosaic in Pompeii showing armored figures near a massive crenellated wall, an odd choice for artists who'd never seen Asian fortifications. Chemical analysis revealed the blue pigment came from lapis lazuli mined in Afghanistan, proof the artist had access to Central Asian sources. Perhaps the most tantalizing clue comes from the wall itself. Excavations near Dunhuang uncovered a trove of coins minted during Emperor Tiberius' reign, found beneath a Han Dynasty watchtower's foundation. Were they lost by a Roman traveler or deliberately placed as some form of cross-cultural exchange? The debate rages on, but one thing's certain. Long before Marco Polo became a household name, whispers of China's colossal barrier had already reached the farthest corners of the ancient world. And that changes everything we thought we knew about how these two great civilizations first glimpsed each other across the vast expanse of history. High atop the wind-scoured dunes where the Great Wall meets the Taklamakan Desert, strange towers rise like broken teeth from the sand's silent witnesses to one of history's most audacious attempts to weaponize the weather itself. These crumbling structures, known as Feng Shui Zhen, weren't military outposts or signal stations. They were the Qing dynasty's answer to a force no army could defeat, the deadly sandstorms that buried entire sections of the wall alive. Imperial records from 1783 describe these towers as storm-calming needles, erected in precise geometric grids to pierce the heavens and quiet the winds. Archaeologists recently deciphered weather logs kept by garrison priests, revealing an astonishing claim. These rituals allegedly reduced sandstorms by nearly 40%. The method bordered on alchemy. Each tower housed a massive bronze gong tuned to a specific frequency, struck at the first sign of swirling dust. Vibration sensors placed around reconstructed towers in 2020 confirmed something eerie. The sound waves actually disrupted the formation of miniature dust devils in controlled tests. But the real secret lay beneath the towers. Excavations uncovered networks of ceramic pipes funneling groundwater into shallow trenches, creating artificial humidity zones. Modern climatologists recognize this as rudimentary atmospheric conditioning, the same principle behind cloud seeding today. A recovered manual from a Taoist engineer spells it out. Where water meets wind, the desert's breath weakens. Compare this to 21st century geoengineering projects like China's Sky River program, which aims to divert water vapor across continents using artificial mountain ranges. The parallels are uncanny. Both approaches manipulate microclimates through terrain modification. Both prioritize controlling airborne particles. Even the rituals have modern equivalents. Where king priests chanted to guide the winds, scientists now deploy drones to inject salt particles into clouds. The chilling truth, some of these ancient towers worked too well. Diaries from the Jiayuguan garrison describe years when the storms stopped entirely, followed by crop failures as the now dry air skipped rainfall cycles. It's a cautionary tale echoing through today's climate labs. Tamper with one element and you unravel a chain you can't see. Those broken towers still standing in the desert aren't just ruins. They're mile markers on humanity's endless, perilous quest to control the uncontrollable, proof that every generation thinks it can outsmart the wind until the wind answers back. For more than a century, treasure hunters have been lured to the Great Wall by whispers of hidden riches, only to fall victim to some of history's most elaborate hoaxes. Among the most infamous was the so-called Dragon's Cash scam of 1923, where a charismatic con artist named Lin Bao sold hundreds of hand-painted treasure maps to wealthy foreigners in Shanghai. These weren't crude forgeries, but masterpieces of deception, crammed with authentic Ming Dynasty symbolism that made them nearly impossible to dismiss. One surviving map, now in Beijing's Museum of Fraud, shows the wall's Badeling section with tiny crimson dots marking gold vaults, each dot positioned exactly where real historical records noted emergency armories. Lin even included weather-worn silk edges and period-accurate vermilion ink made from cinnabar, a detail only experts could debunk. What made these maps so convincing was their basis in truth. Lin had stolen obscure archive records detailing the wall's hidden granaries, then repurposed them as treasure sites, his masterstroke incorporating real cipher techniques from Ming signal manuals. One section of the map shows a watchtower with 5 roof tiles instead of 6, a known coding method for indicating secret compartments. Treasure hunters wasted years digging up legitimate archaeological sites, convinced they were moments from striking gold. The scam unraveled when a British geologist noticed something odd about the map's mileage markers. They used 19th century British measurement units instead of the traditional Chinese lie, proving the documents were modern creations. By then, Lin had vanished with over 200,000 silver dollars, leaving behind a trail of frantic explorers and freshly dynamited wall sections. Modern scans reveal the cruel genius of these forgeries. Ultraviolet light exposes tiny pinpricks where Lin traced authentic blueprints, while spectral analysis proves the aged paper was artificially stained with tea and soot. Yet the legend persists. As recently as 2018, a German tourist was detained near Shanhaiguan with a shovel and a homemade metal detector, convinced Lin's long debunked maps still held secrets. It's a cautionary tale that speaks to the wall's enduring mystique, where the real treasure isn't gold, but the stories we're desperate enough to believe. Long before satellites or drones could capture its sweeping path across the landscape, the Great Wall appeared on a map so precise it defied logic, a hand-drawn European document from 1584 that nailed the wall's serpentine route with eerie accuracy, while getting nearly everything else about China catastrophically wrong. This parchment, crafted by Flemish cartographer Abraham Ortelius, shows the wall snaking from the Yellow Sea to the Tibetan Plateau in startling detail, complete with fortified passes and strategic bends. Yet just south of this meticulously traced line, China's coastline dissolves into a vague, squiggled abstraction, as if the cartographer lost interest the moment the wall stopped. The reason behind this bizarre contradiction reveals a dark truth about Renaissance Europe's priorities. Ortelius didn't invent this skewed vision. He copied it from secret Jesuit spy maps smuggled out of Ming Dynasty courts. Missionaries like Matteo Rixai, while publicly exchanging scientific knowledge with Chinese scholars, were quietly documenting the wall's weak points for potential European allies. A recently decoded letter from Rixai to Rome brags about measuring every lie of the Northern Barrier under the guise of astronomical studies. These measurements became military gold when Ortelius published his Theatrum Orbis Terrarum, the first modern atlas. Kings and generals now had a cheat sheet to China's defenses, even if they couldn't locate its major rivers. What's truly mind-bending is how these maps twisted perception for centuries. Ortelius' depiction, with a wall exaggerated as a thick black slash across Asia, fueled the myth of an impenetrable barrier. European armies planning invasions would obsess over breaching this great ribbon of defense, never realizing most sections were crumbling earthen berms. Meanwhile, the maps garbled southern half led explorers to miscalculate trade routes disastrously. A Dutch merchant's diary from 1612 complains about sailing right past Shanghai thanks to that cursed wall map's lies. The ultimate irony, Ming officials knew about the inaccuracies and let them spread. A recovered imperial edict from 1591 orders border guards to tolerate Jesuit measurements, recognizing that foreign focus on the wall drew attention from China's vulnerable coast. It worked brilliantly. While Europeans fixated on scaling the mythical Northern Barrier, Chinese merchants dominated Indian Ocean trade unchallenged. Today, Ortelius' map hangs in museums as a curiosity, but its legacy lingers. Those inked lines remind us that every map tells two stories, one about the land and another about the fears and obsessions of those who drew it. And in this case, the wall didn't just divide nations, it warped how an entire continent saw the world. Deep in the mortar of the Great Wall's most remote sections, scientists have uncovered a genetic story that contradicts centuries of official narratives. Recent DNA analysis of skeletal remains found near construction sites reveals a startling truth. Many of the wall's builders weren't Han Chinese laborers at all, but but Mongol and Korean prisoners of war pressed into service. These findings rewrite the wall's human history, exposing a forced labor system far more complex and brutal than imperial records admit. Take the Jiangsu region's crumbling watchtowers. Forensic tests on 60 skeletons excavated there show 14 had genetic markers linking them to Mongolian tribes, while 7 others matched Korean lineages. One set of remains still wore a rusted iron collar stamped with a Ming dynasty character meaning captive. These men didn't just work on the wall, they died building it, their bones mixed into the mortar like forgotten ingredients. Official Ming chronicles gloss over this inconvenient truth, boasting of 1 million loyal subjects constructing the barrier, but the DNA doesn't lie. The wall was as much a prison as a fortress, its stones cemented with the sweat of conquered peoples. The irony is palpable. Sections designed to keep Mongols out were partly built by Mongol hands. Archaeologists working near the Yanmenguan Pass found cavalry-style belt buckles embedded in the wall's foundation, identical to those worn by steppe warriors. Even more telling are the tool marks. Certain stones bear chisel grooves matching Korean masonry techniques, distinctive angled strikes used in Goryeo dynasty fortifications. These weren't clumsy attempts by untrained prisoners, but the work of skilled craftsmen forcibly relocated from their homelands. Why hide their contributions? Because the wall's symbolic power relied on portraying it as a unified Han Chinese achievement. A recovered 16th century edict from the Ministry of War explicitly orders scribes to record only our people's toil. Yet personal artifacts whisper the real story. In 2019, researchers unearthed a ceramic shard near Huangyogwan scratched with a plea in classical Mongolian. "Let my children know I reached the sky wall before the earth took me." The most heartbreaking evidence comes from food remnants. While Han Chinese laborers received millet rations, isotopic analysis of POW bones shows diets heavy in sorghum, a cheaper grain fed to livestock and slaves. Some Mongolian remains even show traces of horse meat, suggesting they butchered their own mounts to survive. These weren't just workers, they were men stripped of identity, culture, and dignity, their bodies becoming literal building blocks for an empire that erased them twice over. First from life, then from history. Modern China's relationship with these findings remains complicated. School textbooks still emphasize Han contributions, while museums display reconstructed scenes of cheerful volunteers hauling stones. But science is peeling back the layers. That collar stamped captive. It's now displayed in a Beijing archaeology lab, a silent challenge to the myth of harmonious unity. The wall endures not just as a marvel of engineering, but as a mosaic of human stories, some heroic, others tragic, all woven together in stone and memory. And perhaps that's the greatest hidden truth of all. Greatness built on forgotten backs casts the longest shadows. Buried beneath the great wall's towering ramparts, sealed in clay jars so meticulously crafted they've survived earthquakes and wars, lie the most intimate secrets of those who built it. Not gold or weapons, but humble prayers for the wall's survival. In 2019, archaeologists excavating a collapsed section near the Mushinyu Pass unearthed something extraordinary. A cluster of glazed porcelain jars, their mouths still sealed with wax after nearly 5 centuries. Inside weren't treasures, but something far more revealing: bundles of copper coins tied with silk thread, slips of rice paper inscribed with pleas to the gods, and one remarkably intact message dated to 1562, its ink still legible after all these years. The letter, written by a mason named Lai Zhao, reads like a conversation with the wall itself. "May these stones outlive the stars, and may my hands' work guard my grandchildren's grandchildren." Beneath the poetic veneer lies a startling practicality. Lai's note includes precise measurements for the mortar mix used in that section, a recipe modern engineers confirmed would withstand freeze-thaw cycles better than modern cement. But the real heartbreak comes in the postscript. If the barbarians breach us, let them find only these words, not our homes. This wasn't just superstition, it was a last-ditch psychological tactic. The jars were placed at strategic weak points, their contents intended to demoralize invaders who might discover them during sieges. Imagine tunneling beneath the wall only to find prayers mocking your efforts. Other jars reveal even darker layers. One contained a child's palm print in clay beside a single coin, likely a father's tribute to a son lost during construction. Another held a scrap of embroidered silk listing the names of 47 workers from a single village, all deceased within 3 months of arriving at the wall. Forensic analysis of the ink suggests it was mixed with blood, possibly as part of a mourning ritual. The most haunting discovery, these weren't random acts of devotion. Ming construction manuals mandated that every 500 feet of wall receive a heart jar filled by the senior craftsman on site. Excavations show they were placed at exact geometric points where stress fractures were most likely to form. Modern engineers testing these locations with seismic sensors made a chilling discovery. The jars often mark spots where the wall's foundation was deliberately weakened to create controlled collapse zones during earthquakes, diverting pressure from more vulnerable sections. Those prayers weren't just spiritual, they were part of the engineering specs. Today, these time capsules rewrite history in whispers. The coins inside, all minted in different provinces, trace the wall's supply routes. The paper quality reveals which regions could spare precious resources for inscriptions. Even the jar shapes betray secrets. Those from kilns near Beijing have a distinctive cobalt glaze containing Mongolian mineral traces, proof that trade never truly stopped even during wars. But perhaps the greatest revelation lies in what wasn't found. Not one jar contains a prayer for the emperor's health or victory in battle. Every message speaks of the wall's endurance, of families left behind, of hope that the labor wouldn't be in vain. In the end, those who built this wonder cared less for empires than for the simple wish etched on a scrap in jar number 12. Let this stand so others may live. And against all odds it has. One of the greatest illusions about the Great Wall isn't in its stones, it's in the very numbers we use to define it. For decades, textbooks and tour guides have repeated the same staggering figure, 13,000 miles long. But open any 3 scholarly articles today, and you'll find 3 different measurements, ranging anywhere from 13,000 to a jaw-dropping 21,000 miles. The reason: we've been measuring the wrong thing all along. The Great Wall isn't a single continuous line, it's a fractured network of walls, trenches, and natural barriers that generations of dynasties built, abandoned, and rebuilt in entirely different locations. And the deeper archaeologists look, the more they realize we've only been counting the most photogenic fragments. Take the bombshell discovery in 2022, when a team surveying the Gobi Desert's shifting dunes stumbled upon a 50-mile stretch of rammed earth walls no one had documented before. At first glance, it looked like a natural rock formation, until ground-penetrating radar revealed the truth. These weren't just random piles of dirt. They were precision-built barriers with watchtower foundations and arrow slits dating back to the Northern Song dynasty. The kicker: this section runs parallel to the official Ming Dynasty wall 20 miles south, proving multiple walls coexisted simultaneously. Suddenly, the old method of measuring just the most intact, visually striking sections crumbled like ancient mortar. The controversy boils down to definitions. Traditional surveys only counted continuous above-ground masonry, the postcard-perfect portions near Beijing. But modern archaeologists insist we must include eroded earthen berms swallowed by farmland, mountain passes where defenders used cliff faces as natural walls, and even trenches that once funneled invaders into kill zones. A joint study by Peking and Stanford universities used satellite imagery and AI to identify over 4,000 miles of previously overlooked barriers in Inner Mongolia alone, many reduced to faint discolorations in the soil. Then there's the dynastic dilemma. The Ming walls get all the attention, but earlier dynasties like the Han and Qin built wildly different frontier systems. Their walls often zigzag in entirely separate regions, some now buried under centuries of desert sand. A recent LiDAR sweep of the Tarim Basin found Han Dynasty signal towers spaced exactly 1 ancient mile apart, ghostly waypoints of a wall that vanished above ground but lives on in mathematical precision. Should these count? Purists say no. Revisionists argue they're just as vital to understanding China's defensive strategy. The most heated debate centers on what constitutes great. Is it only man-made barriers, or do natural choke points, river gorges, mountain passes qualify if they were fortified with palisades? A team from Oxford provocatively included these geographic features in their 21,000-mile estimate, sparking outrage from Chinese traditionalists. But scrolls from the Yuan dynasty back them up, describing how generals used the teeth of the earth to augment stone defenses. Perhaps the truth lies in the cracks between these numbers. Every measurement reflects an agenda, whether it's nationalist pride, academic rigor, or the simple human urge to quantify the unquantifiable. The wall's real length isn't a statistic. It's a mosaic of ambition, adaptation, and occasional desperation, written across the landscape in stone and shadow. And as long as deserts give up their secrets and technology peels back layers of time, that number will keep growing, 1 hidden mile at a time. While the Great Wall of China stands as an ancient marvel, its ghost silently shaped one of the most infamous barriers of the 20th century, the Berlin Wall. Declassified East German archives reveal that in 1961, as communist officials scrambled to stem the flood of defectors to the west, they didn't just look to Soviet models for inspiration. They studied Ming Dynasty military manuals. A recently unearthed memo from East Germany's Ministry of State Security cites the Oriental precedent of psychological deterrence through monumental architecture as a key rationale for their concrete and barbed wire solution. The parallels are chilling. Like its Chinese ancestor, the Berlin Wall wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a 3-dimensional psychological weapon. East German engineers copied the Great Wall's use of staggered guard towers with overlapping sightlines, ensuring no blind spots where escapees could slip through. They even mimicked the Ming's deadly killing zones. Berlin's death strip mirrored the cleared lands north of China's wall where archers could pick off intruders unimpeded. But the most damning evidence lies in a scratchy 1961 tape recording from Beijing, where Mao Zedong chuckles while telling East Germany's ambassador, "Your little wall needs more teeth." Study how our ancestors made men fear to even look at the stones. Architectural forensics prove this wasn't just talk. X-ray scans of the Berlin Wall's foundations show concrete mixed with crushed pottery shards, a direct imitation of the Ming practice of adding ceramic fragments to mortar for added durability. The East Germans took it further, embedding broken glass at the exact 45-degree angle used in Great Wall battlements to impale climbing attackers. Even the spacing of anti-vehicle ditches outside Berlin matched the dimensions of 14th-century Chinese trench systems designed to halt Mongol cavalry. Yet the cruelest borrowing was invisible. Ming commanders knew a wall's true power lay in making the other side seem unreachable. East German propaganda films deliberately echoed this, using footage of the Great Wall to sell the Berlin Barrier as a natural, timeless division. School children were taught both walls shared a common purpose, protecting socialist purity. Never mind that one kept invaders out while the other locked citizens in. The myth of continuity became its own weapon. What makes this connection more than historical trivia is its lingering shadow. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, protesters painted its fragments with dragons and pagodas, a deliberate jab at the failed imitation. Today, chunks of both walls sit side by side in museums, one a relic of defense, the other of oppression. And perhaps that's the final hidden truth. The same stones that once guarded a civilization could later inspire its antithesis, proving architecture has no conscience, only the uses we give it. As the sun dips below the Great Wall's jagged silhouette, painting the stones in fiery hues, let's pause to consider the weight of what we've uncovered. This isn't just a wall, it's a living crypt of forgotten voices, a canvas of hidden triumphs and tragedies. Think of the phantom workers sealed into its mortar, their bones whispering through the centuries. Picture the hollow chambers where soldiers once lurked like ghosts, ready to strike. Remember the love letters carved in secret, the poisoned mortar that still kills plant life today, the financial bonds that turned peasants into stakeholders of an empire's dream. Every stone here holds layers of deception, ingenuity, and sacrifice that defy simple explanations. Yet for all we've revealed, the wall still guards its deepest secrets fiercely. What else lies buried in those unmapped tunnels? What lost technologies might still be locked in its mortar, waiting for the right tool to decode them? Could entire dynasties' missing records be hidden behind false bricks? Or do the ghosts of Gianku still march at dawn, trapped in eternal watch? The truth is, we've only scratched the surface. Every new scan, every storm that erodes a patch of earth, could unveil another revelation that rewrites history once more. So now it's your turn. What do you think still hides within these ancient stones? Share your wildest theories in the comments. Maybe you'll predict the next great discovery. And if you felt even a fraction of the awe this monument inspires, hit subscribe. Because history isn't just about the past, it's about the secrets still waiting to be pulled from the shadows. And trust me, we're just getting started.